All right, welcome everybody to our last class session for this course. To start off today, we're going to do a quick review of something that Mike sent in. So he's been playing with his Trunnion post and sent me a sample file, which is always kind of the first step in asking for help, so that was great. And then he sent this error message along with it. And I thought this would be a good chance for us to just review the information that we're being told in this error file. All of this stuff here is information that the post engine logs when it is starting up and preparing to process a file. So it tells us the report has been created, we've initialized the log file, it tells us the version we're running, MP version 20 and components version 20, so that would be Mastercam 2018. It opened the post. It shows us where the post was. It says an encrypted post file is associated with the post file. Gives us the post name. So here it shows us the PSB that was associated with this PST. And tells us the post processor file has finished the read process. Initialization of all of the variables, strings, and post blocks was successful. The search for defined post variables, and I think that's basically predefined. Oh, so this is predefined post variable stuff, and then this is probably user defined, and all of that was successful. And then we get this rather daunting list of errors that's being reported. Now, I'll tell you that every time you make a spelling mistake, you're almost always guaranteed to generate at least a couple of errors. One is basically this label has not been defined, which means that you've got a variable that you used in your code that there was no initialization done for. And typically it's just a spelling error. You either left out a character or added an extra character. And then you'll also get a formula error because you tried to use a non-existent variable as part of a formula. The formula also generates an error, as well as the name itself being undefined generates an error. So even if you see a whole bunch of errors like this, try not to worry about it too much. Just like every other problem, you just tackle it one step at a time. So the first thing that we can see is there are errors that are generated inside the PSB file. And this -1 as the first number inside the parentheses here basically just tells us it's in the encrypted portion. It tells us it occurred on lines 2955, 2956, 57, and 65. And since these lines are in the PSB, we don't really have a way to access them. We are also getting errors reported from the PST file itself. And these we should be able to find if there truly is a problem. 1541, 1543. So if I go look in the post and we look at the line number, by the way, Alt-G as in golf on the keyboard or as in go to, you can enter a line number and it will jump there. So 1541, it is a formula because it's a Boolean formula, but it's just an if statement. It says if PANG_output. Now, because it's used in a Boolean statement, this, as a general rule, must be a variable. So we can't do an if comparison statement to see if this is a non-zero value on a post block. It must be a variable. So this just says, you know, basically if this variable is not 0, and yet in our error file it's telling us 1541, the formula is attempting to divide by 0. That's odd. Now, the only way that this itself could be attempting to divide by 0 is if this was part of a global formula that is being evaluated on this line. And I'm seeing a bunch of errors that are present in this error file, 1543, 1543. So I go and I look at 1543, and there is a formula on this line. SV underscore P underscore abs equals P abs. Okay, that is a formula. But it's telling me there's an error on that line. The formula is attempting to divide by 0. Looking at all of these various listings here, so if we go to 1008, Control G. So I'll jump to 1008. If cut RA head and use underscore G45. So it's telling me on this line that I've got an error. Well, I find that really hard to believe. This is all of the standard logic that exists inside the PST file. My suspicion is that you may have somehow gotten a PSB file that is either corrupt or just was like a way older version of the PSB. And so maybe the global formulas inside that PSB file have changed and are no longer valid. Because all of this stuff is, from what I can tell, is the standard logic. So let's test it on my system, see what we're getting. And this should be pointing to my copy of that post. And there is also that same PSB in here. So this PSB, 268 kilobytes. And if we look at the other PSB, 268. Okay, so at least it's the same size. And this one's 95. Your version is 109. Meh, it's a little long, but you know, comparatively. Doesn't look like there's anything way crazy in here, though. So, the post text. What about MR2? Well, MR2. Yeah, even if we do, yeah, MR2 was not enabled. That's a good call, though. Yeah, because MR2 is the right angle head, and putting a value in here if you didn't enable everything else, that may cause an error, but it wouldn't cause the amount of errors that we were seeing. It's a good call though. Looking in these settings. Yeah. So we're going to post it out and see what kind of errors we're getting on our end. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's literally all the same ones. The formula is attempting to divide by 0. So let's do this. We're going to make a copy of that. So first we'll try just replacing the PSB. See if that has any effect. So we're still getting these same errors. So then we're going to do it with just this guy right here. Remember, if you want to test or change, yeah, that's another thing to test, is where does it stop posting code. But the thing is, I don't think it stops posting. I think it does make it all the way to the end. End cut upper front at right angle, end cut upper front at right angle, or at right side. Upper front angle at right side, yeah. And then here's the one at left side, and you can see here's the one at left side down here. So it runs fine. It just produces this huge amount of errors. So let's see what happens. First, I'm going to close the output. Control Alt Shift and the letter P, as in pilot or palm on the keyboard, will enable that select post button here. So we got a question, can we run the debugger to follow the trail? Yes and no. The problem with the debugger and the 5-axis post is there's two of them. The first is that it won't follow any of the trails into the PSB, so we can't track any of the logic or any of the stuff that's going on where the problem is occurring. we can see that most of those errors are being generated in the PSB, and even the ones that are being generated in the post themselves are coming from areas that are either default logic, in other words, the logic's been there, you know, as long as I've been working with this post. So the likelihood of it, you know, when we're getting an error on something like if use clamp, you know that there's a problem somewhere else. It's not with this variable. This use clamp variable has been in the post for a long, long time. And having a Boolean that checks to see if this is a non-zero value should not be reporting a divide by zero error unless this use clamp is somehow used in a global formula. And that's the other things that make global formulas really hard to track down. The post debugger does not track global formulas and does not show their usage or implementation. So you can have variables in your watch list. You might have the current value be 1.5, previous value is 0, and then you hit step statement and all of a sudden the output is 14 because this global formula came along and overrode everything just prior to it being written to the NC file. It's a bugger to follow. The second issue with running the debugger on the 5-axis post is that there are so many calculations and so much logic going on, it is almost impossible to step through. I mean, there's literally, for every line of code, probably, 10,000 calculations that are going on. And a lot of the times, it's for, just saving a bunch of information, even if it's not currently being used. We save stuff and we update stuff. And we do all these things. So trying to run it through the debugger is a total pain, to be honest. That is why I prefer to put in string literal statements and just post out the code so that you can narrow down the spot that you're looking in. Okay, so I'm going to try. First of all, we want to make sure we're using the correct post. Yeah. Forgot to mention, you set MI10 in the toolpaths in order to force the machine to plus or minus A, since this is a test and not the real part. Yes, I did see that. And honestly, you should be able to set any of those. Oh, if you set them all back to 0, it posts with no errors. So let's look here. Secondary axis 0. Well, could be missing a bracket. And if we post just this one, okay, it posts with no errors. So there's got to be at least one of these in here. Okay, so this is 2 for negative. And if we post that one, okay, this one is the single op, and it is posting negative, no errors. So it sounds like it's maybe one of these where you want to go A positive. And so if we look here, you've got well, no, Mike's telling us exactly what it was, is that it won't force the positive. So it looks like maybe this guy here is causing that to happen. Let's see. So okay, so this one's working. So let's do this. Process of elimination. Grab the first 4 operations and post it. No errors. And this is the other reason. So Stephen, this is the other reason I prefer not to use the debugger. I'm doing process of elimination right now to find the operation that's giving me an error. If I was trying to run this through the debugger, where do I start? If I just start at the beginning and I start stepping through or even playing through, I'm going to be there for a long, long time. Trying to wade through all of the information, it's just really hard to do it in the debugger. So, like I said, I'm doing it kind of one step at a time. So I'll add 7, 8, 9, and 10. So we went 1 through 6. It did it fine. We add 7, 8, 9, and 10. So far, so good. We'll add a few more there. So now we've added 11 through 15. Okay, still so far so good. We'll add all the way through 20. Well, okay. So we know we're getting error messages when we add the last 2. So let's see what's up. Yeah, if we just add 21 and add it to the stack, do we get the error? Yes. So next question is, if we just post 21, do we get the error? So we post 21. Well, PSOF is the start of file. That only gets called one time. That only gets called for the very first tool change. Oh, PEOF? Maybe. What happens if we do 20 and 21? We do get the error. Okay, so it's something between 20 and 21. And yeah, we're getting all that crap. So let's go see what we've got. Ah, I think I see it already. Well, we're not seeing it here. Well, maybe not. So what I'm seeing when I first open this up, you know, we've got a negative setting here. We've got nothing else on, including no retract and approach clearance. So the post uses this in calculations when it hits a limit, and I'm wondering if it's that. So, but we need to compare that to 21. So we went from negative to positive on the secondary axis. And let's see if we do this. If we go and turn everything back to the default, and we turn this to negative, because we should be able to use this. We should be able to say, hey, I want negative here, negative 30, and for 21, I want negative here. So I'm going to set negative for both the nutating bias and the secondary axis. Even though nutating should only be used for nutating, we'll go ahead and set that one. And this one's 2 and 2 because it's set that way. So everything else is set to the defaults. I'm going to force a regenerate on both of those and repost. Still get the errors. So the only thing that I can see that's different, or I guess similar between these two, basically your plane is supposed to be C180. That's how we've got them, you know, set up in here. At least that's what you've named them. And then you've named them a positive 30 and a negative 30. If we go look at those planes, so positive 30 C180. Okay, so Z is pointing up, X positive's pointing to the left. And if we look at negative 30 C180, it is been rotated about the X axis. So that should, yeah, that should still be just fine there. So it looks like there is some kind of plane error being generated between those two. So let's see what's up. Well, this is an interesting issue, but I don't want it to take up all of our class. So I think what we can do is we can table this until office hours. And what I'll probably do in between now and office hours is take the PSM file that I've got and configure it to match yours, and then run it through there and see if I can figure out why it's giving us this error. It's probably something silly, but as far as I know, we should be able to set the negative limit here and then the positive limit on the other one. and that should work. There should be no reason we can't set a 2 on this op and then a 1 on the next op. The other thing that we can try, we've got the same tool. So it's still tool number 1. That's what I'm going to check actually is bias null. So there is a setting called bias null that allows us to apply the rotary biases. So if we go down here, minus 150, 30, minus 150, bias null is turned off. So bias null will allow us to use the MI4 and MI5 bias options to attempt to give it an angle to position to. So what we'll do is we'll turn off the MI9 and MI10 switches. And for op 20, we want to try and hit negative 30 for the secondary. So I'll set the initial secondary to negative 30 for my bias. Then in op 21, we'll also turn these off, but attempt to hit positive 30 for the bias here. So we'll change those, force a regen, and post it. And we get no errors, but do we get what we want? No. So here we're getting negative 30 C180. And here we're getting negative 30 C0 instead of positive 30 C180. There is another thing to check. There was at one time another method to this, adjust a secondary set to 2. And I just wonder if that has any effect. Nope. So there's something going on with this operations tool plane. Where is it? Number 21. Where it's just not letting us get to that A30 position. Yeah, but that's just it. Is that causes the error. I mean, if I can make it go negative, that's fine. But if I make it go positive, that's where we get the error. So it's specifically that setting that is causing us grief. Literally all of these error messages in the PSB file, it's coming up with something big. I mean, honestly, I would submit this one to CNC Software at posts@mastercam.com and send them the exact same send them the exact same test file and say, hey, post out operations 20 and 21, 20 set MI10 to 2 and 21 set MI10 to 1, and all hell breaks loose. I mean, yeah, we can mess around with this all day, but that doesn't explain, Husker, why we're getting this huge list of errors, right? It's obviously a post bug. There's some weird bug with flipping this over, and not to say that we can't attempt to bend it to our will, but I've never seen that happen ever with any of the posts that I've worked on where we flip a misc value from 1 to 2, from 2 to 1, or, first op goes from 2 and the next one goes to 1. Please report those, because I've never, like I said, I've never seen that. Yeah. Anytime you come up with like a post error like that, and sometimes, let me make sure I shut that down. No error, but yeah, it doesn't like 0 in there. Oh shit, look at that. Haha. So for whatever reason, we can tell it to use the positive, but it really wanted something here in this initial primary bias, which is funky, because that means that whatever logic gets tripped when this is a positive 1 instead of a positive 2 really doesn't like the 0 in here. But that tells me it's surely a bug. Okay, so we can go through the process like we did to figure out the correct settings, right, that will make it post out without the errors, but that doesn't mean that there isn't an error there. If anything, it should tell you that, what caused the problem to occur, if it can. And sometimes it's hard to do that, right? Because it's just a formula. You're just checking things. But that's definitely one. Yeah. Definitely send that in. 0 as a default is likely the problem. The logic then should have, if the 0 doesn't work, then try 180. And obviously that number is being used in a formula somewhere as the divisor. And it's never good to have that. It's like you should check that before you run the formula, and if it's 0, make it 360. Well, make it 360. That is 0, but not 0, right? It's just the other side, one revolution away. So, there's a lot of ways logically to fix it, but you can see that one little number generated all of that, which is crazy when you think about it. Exactly. But you shouldn't have to tweak it like that. Now, I will say that sometimes you do have to tweak the biases. I mean, that's why they're there, because the post just won't spit out what you want. But at the same time, flipping this switch, all it should do is not give you the rotation you're looking for in the post, right? It gives you positive 30, 0 instead of negative 30, C180. But it shouldn't blow up the way it did. So this is an excellent one to send in. Yeah, and I use head and biases, especially on the head and limited C-axis motion. Oh yeah, man, pre-winding that head, something I do all the time. Sure, absolutely. But what I'm saying is, normally if you don't pre-wind it, you just get output that's not correct, right? You look in the code and you say, okay, I'm going from 270 to minus whatever 90, and and that's not right. But you shouldn't generate this whole ton of error messages about dividing by 0, right? So that's where I say, okay, this is definitely a post bug. And in some ways, I think that also shows some of the limitations of this post. This post does a lot of stuff for you in the background automatically, and they've built a lot of really good logic into it. But at the same time, by trying to have one post that could do everything, they've really bloated it, because there are, you know, on a head-head machine, there's a whole bunch of stuff for table and head table and nutating that you're never going to need. I mean, it's just, yeah, you'll need it if you're setting up the post for a different kinematic configuration, but it's just overhead for whatever your specific machine is, right? Like, your machine probably only uses 25% of all the logic that's in the post, no matter what type of machine you've got, whether it's head table, you know, there's just whole bunches of functions that are available in case you need them. It's like a big library, but you know, you're sitting there scratching your head trying to figure out which book you need. Okay, so got that one done. All right, well, at least we got a little lesson in debugging and you know, tracking down problems one step at a time. So at least that's kind of useful. All right, this is our last class of the course. We're still going to do another office hours session this weekend. What I wanted to try, fix, expand, collapse, and twice update. Nice. I do want to try and look at how to implement tilted work plane, which is also known as G68.2 in the Fanuc world, and it's known as top map in the post itself. I do think this is actually probably a good time to take a break, and we'll just take a quick, like, 10-minute break. Allows me to split the video, and then we'll come back and we'll hit it for like an hour, take another quick break, and then do another hour. We may run just a little late tonight. If we can't fit it all in, that's okay. We can still finish the rest of it up during office hours, but I do want to try and get as much covered about this particular subject as possible. So let's take our break.